Be a review over homeworks number 4 and 5. A quick review, just basically that way you get like a general understanding of what you should have been reading or what you should have read. So I'm just going to start with just introducing just these two key terms in case you don't really know the meaning of them. They're going to come up, especially starting now and throughout the rest of the next couple of units, just because this is the spread of not only people, but spreading of ideas, right, of goods. We're thinking about trade routes, so we're thinking about all these different exchanges of trade. So the first term, diasporic community, this is when groups of people from one place settle in another place and basically intermingle with that population. And we see this a lot when people from Arabia, people from Persia are settling in places like India and influencing that population, right? So it's the spread of culture eventually. Speaking of spreading of culture, cultural diffusion is kind of similar, but diasporic meaning the spread of people, cultural is the spread of culture. So think people's beliefs, people's religions, ideas. These are all things that are going to be spread along the Indian Ocean Trade Network just as much as it was spread along the Silk Road. If you have out your Unit 2 calendar, just kind of notice these terms for topic 2.3. Calicut, Gujarat, and Malacca. These are three essential places that are basically going to be urban centers and centers of trade. If you notice, Calicut is on the western coast of India. So you're going to have a lot of people from Arabia, a lot of people from Persia coming to Calicut in particular and settling up there, setting up shop. Just the same as Malacca, which is in modern day Malaysia. It's literally right above Sumatra, so kind of toward the east of India. The same thing is going to happen to that place where you have these huge urban centers of trade, and people living there are eventually settling there. So just to review some key things, how I kind of structured the slide was I just kind of framed 4 questions that are essentially kind of the overview of your readings. So let's start with the first question. How did Islam spread to India, into Southeast Asia? Well, for one, India is going to experience a little bit of a difference when it comes to Islam spreading than Southeast Asia, for example. So in India, you're going to have a lot of Muslim merchants from Arabia and Persia establishing trading communities along India's western coast. So like I said, think about Gujarat, Malabar in particular. These are places that are along India's western coast, and it's easy to kind of get there just because they're right on the water. Now, they're going to have peaceful interactions with these places in India that is going to make the spread of Islamic culture very, very easy to do. But it's going to be a gradual expansion. Now, we talked about this in the last unit. The Delhi Sultanate is going to conquer India, particularly northern India, and they are Turkish Muslim group. So they are going to bring in Islam to northern India. But if you recall, they had a really hard time making sure all of India was converted to Islam, just because we talked about how Hinduism was so ingrained in India's society, especially in northern India, because of the caste system, that it made it really difficult to convert many Indians to Islam. However, Islam will soon spread to other parts of India and into Southeast Asia as well. And then one other reason why Islam was able to spread in India was because of migration. Sufi missionaries and scholars also settled in Indian cities in rural areas, and they were able to spread Islam through spiritual teaching, charity, and local integration rather than force, which made a huge, huge difference. Because we're going to see this in Southeast Asia, where it's kind of different on how Islam spreads. Just because in Southeast Asia, you have a little bit more of religious tolerance. For example, we know that in these regions in Southeast Asia, Buddhism, Islam, and Hinduism are all going to flourish in its own kind of capacity and way. That wasn't the same in India, right? So in Southeast Asia, peaceful conversion and trade is going to make sure that Islam is spreading. So you have Muslim merchants from India and Arabia that introduce Islam to port cities like Malacca. And this begins around the 13th century. But you also have local rulers converting to Islam. We talked about we talked about this in the last unit, how kings and local leaders adopted Islam to strengthen trade ties with Muslim merchants and how that basically legitimized their rule. And they just didn't do this with Islam. They did it with Buddhism as well. So this is encouraging their people, the people that they rule after, to convert as well. And then last but not least, we can't deny the importance of Sufi influences. So again, Sufis made Islam adaptable to local people's beliefs and traditions, basically making conversion smoother and more widespread. Now, how did the environment impact South and Southeast Asian society and trade? Well, a couple of ways. Your readings, and this is a vocab term, so make sure you know it. Your readings talked about how monsoon winds were predominantly in this region that made traveling across East Africa and southern India a little bit more easier. Traders and merchants relied on these seasonal monsoon patterns. And basically these are irregular patterns throughout the year where wind shifts kind of changes. So for example, if you were an East African like trader or merchant and you were trying to get to southern India, you could rely on summer winds from going southwest to northeast that would carry ships easier from East Africa to India. The same can be said for if you were trying to go back from India to East Africa, you could rely on winter winds in order to carry you back. So this predictability encouraged long distance trade, creating a connected maritime economy. Another way the environment impacted South and Southeast Asian society and trade was the advancement in irrigation systems. We talked briefly about this in the last unit, particularly focusing on the Khmer region or the Khmer Empire or Angkor Wat Empire. Remember, they built some very complex irrigation systems that basically utilize unpredictable rainfall. They build reservoirs and canals and wells to manage this unpredictable rainfall. And they're going to use this to maximize crop production. And so all of this is supporting urbanization. All of this is supporting political stability. And most importantly, all of this is supporting and encouraging population growth. Because if you have food for your people, then you're going to attract more people to live in your different regions. Some of the innovations of Indian Ocean trade, that was the whole point of the treasure hunt that we did in class the other day. There were several innovations that came about this trade route, starting with maritime technologies. We know that junk ships were essentially very important in trading because they were larger and more stable for carrying heavy cargo, right? So you can carry more things back to your regions, back to your home states and countries. The magnetic compass and the astrolabe are helped navigating the seas a little bit easier. If you think about it, before compasses, before astrolabes, things that kind of help guide you in these treacherous waters, people had to rely on just basic necessities and just what other people or travelers told them. Magnetic compass improved maritime navigation accuracy, along with the astrolabe that was used for navigation by the stars. And so this all increased basically navigating the waters. Some commercial practices that were kind of innovations in its own right were bills of exchange. So remember, initially, people would bring money with them, so gold, coins, and this made traveling a little bit harder, right? Because you have to lug all of this money around. What bills of exchange did was it established these letters of credit and created the earlier institutions of banking systems, which made trade safer and more efficient. One last thing to kind of walk away knowing regarding the Indian Ocean Trade Network was the influence on trade, or the influence of trade on Southeast Asia, specifically Funan and Srivijaya. Funan is a state that was located in modern-day Cambodia and Vietnam, and Funan is going to control key trade routes between India and China via the Mekong River. And just as we're going to see or start to see in these cities like Calicut and Malacca, Funan is going to adopt Indian culture. That means Hinduism, Buddhism is also going to spread in this city, showing early Indian influence through trade. And they're also going to become wealthy from port taxes and regional trade. Srivijaya is a city that we looked at in the last unit, which is a sea-based empire. They are going to be a powerful Malay kingdom centered on Sumatra that's going to dominate the Strait of Malacca, which is going to be the main maritime route between the Indian Ocean and China. Now, Srivijaya is going to control and tax shipping through the region, which is basically going to make it a choke point for global trade. And most importantly, they're going to sponsor Buddhist learning and welcome monks and scholars, spreading Indian religions and culture ideas. And from all of these influences, they are going to grow rich and become a cosmopolitan city due to Indian Ocean commerce and Chinese trade connections. So there you have it. This is a very quick overview and a big key takeaway of the Indian Ocean Trade Network. So just make sure that you understand those key terms that are under topic 2.4, along with the information on these few slides. All right, so this is just